Hey guys, welcome to another painting class. My name's Cori Jaye and I'll be your teacher today. So today's class is all about Expressionism. So Expressionism is a style of painting that is very expressive and it surrounds expressing emotion. So here are a couple quick facts about Expressionist art movement and what it's all about. So Expressionism was a modernist movement initially in poetry and painting that originated from Northern Europe. It began around the beginning of the 20th century, and it's all about producing an emotional effect in the viewer, focusing on the emotional experience rather than physical reality. The term is also suggestive of angst, and some suggest that these types of paintings are a reaction to more positive movements such as Impressionism. So it's a movement that's all about expressing emotion and conveying that to the viewer. So I thought I'd show you some famous Expressionist works of art to start getting your mind to think about the movement. So the first one is The Scream. Next we have Explosion. Next we have a self-portrait. And finally we have The Street. So as you can see, these are all very expressive works and they have a varying degree of subjects. So you have portraiture, you have some landscape, you have some city life. So it doesn't have to be one type of subject work. It's really about the expression of what you're trying to convey in the piece. So for this class, everyone's going to create a separate, unique piece that's different. But we can all follow the same guidelines to help us get to a finished product. So we all want to create a finished expressionist work, and so here I've developed some steps to get us there. So I just wanted to show you to start. This is the piece that I'll be painting in the video. So first I'm going to go through the different steps about how I arrived at this piece and how we're going to get there, and then I'm going to show you how I painted it. Now again, just to reiterate, the idea of this class is to take the steps and action them with your own outcome. So you're not trying to get exactly what I got, which is basically impossible, as this is an expressionist class and it's about expressing something from within, but we're going to use the same steps to get there. So here we go. Here are 6 steps to help you create an expressionist work of art. So number 1 is to pick a theme or an emotion that you would like to express. So all successful works of art start with an idea. So this theme or this emotion that we choose is going to help guide us as to what other decisions we're going to make to create the successful painting at the end. Number 2 is to find a reference photo that helps convey the emotion or theme that you're trying to express. So for example, if you were trying to express the emotion of sadness, you could choose someone crying or an image of the rain or dark clouds, anything that's going to help convey that sadness across to the viewer. Now, I use this reference photo here for my piece. So if you relate to that and that relates to your theme and you want to go ahead and use that, you can go ahead, it's linked. But also, if you want to create your own work that's separate, feel free to find your own reference photo. Number 3 is to decide on a color palette that helps you convey your theme. So I'll just go ahead and show my piece here again. So I chose a dark color palette for this work because the piece is a little bit more somber and dark, and so that's the colors that help me to express that. But if you're going for a more happy piece, you want to choose more bright colors. So you want to pick your color palette based on trying to express the emotion or theme that you're trying to express, but you also want to make sure you still have a variation of darks and lights in your piece, whatever the color palette is. So for example, for my piece, I decided to use this turquoise color as my highlights, and then the rest of my colors were quite deep. So I still had a color that was a little bit lighter, to give me different variations of value, and then the rest were nice and dark. So just keep that in mind as well when you're choosing your color palette. Number 4 is to create a full color background. So to start, we really want to cover the entire piece with paint, and you want to use your colors and just lay them out on the canvas whatever way feels good to you. So you want to be kind of intuitive with it, but you also want to keep in mind expressing your theme. So throughout the whole piece, you want to keep that emotion in your mind and try and let it out onto the canvas through color. So we want to cover the entire background to start, and that's really going to help us create this layering technique that often Expressionism has. And it's also going to help get us going and give us a direction for our piece. So you're going to keep layering the colors on the canvas, filling the entire background until you're happy with it. So for example, if you've laid all your colors down and the background is full of color, there's no more white space, but you're still not quite 100% happy with it, you can either let it dry completely or keep working it while it's wet, but you want to keep going until you get to a place where you feel like A, it's going to help you to convey what you're trying to convey, and B, you like visually how it looks. Now, number 5 is going to be starting to draw in your subject matter. So if you're doing a portrait like me, this is where you would start to bring your portrait over and start to draw it onto the canvas or paint it onto the canvas, whichever way that makes the most sense for your piece. Now also when you're painting it, maybe it's only partially seen. Maybe that will help convey your emotion better. Or maybe it's full on, you can see every part of the portrait and little bits of the background color will shine through here and there. Whatever makes sense for, again, conveying your theme, that's how you want to lay the image onto the canvas. Now for me, you can see that I left quite a bit of the background showing through in my piece, and I feel like that kind of aids the mysterious qualities of this work. So you want to keep these options in mind. You can have the full image on, you can have it kind of be see-through or just parts of it seen, or just give the viewer elements of the portrait or whatever your subject matter is, and just trying to express your piece in whichever way makes the most sense. So number 6 is varying your brush stroke. So for this piece, we really want to try to use different types of line work, different types of brush stroke, and this all helps us give a more creative and interesting piece to the viewer to look at. So for example, if all my brush strokes were thick, it wouldn't be as interesting as if some were thick and some were thin. So in my piece, you see that I use some marker line work in it as well, and that just really helps to add the interest to the viewer. Again, you always want to keep your theme in mind and what makes sense for your theme, but overall, I think that if you try to add some different types of brush strokes, some different types of brush sizes, some different ways of making marks on your piece or strokes, that kind of thing, it'll really add interest to your piece. Okay, so now that we have those 6 tips in mind, I'm going to go ahead and show you how I created my work. And feel free to take any tips or tricks or techniques with you when you go and move on to start to create yours. So let's get into it. Okay, so to start, I'm going to show the colors that I am going to use first for the background here. And I'm going to use a selection of mostly deeper dark colors, but I'm going to choose a couple that do have a bit of white in them to be my highlight colors. So you can see I got that turquoise and the red, which are quite light, and those are going to be my highlight colors, and then the rest of my colors are going to be deep and dark and help to convey that kind of moodiness that this piece has. So my first step is to make sure that the entire canvas is covered with paint. So I'm creating my colorful background here. And this step is really, really nice and really freeing and just feels really good because you're not trying to make it look like anything. You're just trying to get the color onto the canvas and also make sure that you're using colors that are going to convey your message. Now, you do want it to convey the emotion you're trying to convey. So in that respect, you are trying to make it convey something. But it's not anything that you're trying to mimic or you're trying to get exactly to look a certain way. So I'm gonna use this larger brush here because when you cover larger areas of the canvas, you wanna make sure you're using a larger brush. Just like when you're doing detail work, you wanna use a smaller brush. And I'm just spreading the paint and the colors all over. Now you can see that I'm choosing darker colors here to start. And then once I have the canvas full of paint, I'm gonna go through with that turquoise color and start to add in some highlights in some different areas here. And I'm just moving my hand back and forth and just kind of laying on the paint nice and thick here. Now I'm going to grab a bit of that turquoise color, and you can see that it starts to show up really, really strongly because all the rest of the colors are so dark. And this turquoise has quite a bit of white in it, so it shows up really, really bright and nice. And I'm going to try and just go wherever my hand feel like going with this and let it kind of flow nicely onto the canvas here. I am going to start to try and vary my brush strokes and the way that I'm moving my hand just to create some variance and some interest to the background, and also to make the piece a little bit more exciting. So here comes all those different strokes that I'm using, and I'm going to grab a little bit more and just kind of keep working it. Now you want to work this painting until you're really happy with the way it looks. So I'm almost there, but I'm just going to grab a little bit more of that turquoise color here, just so I can create some really strong areas of that turquoise and a little bit more red too. And then I'm going to go and put my brush in and just kind of be a little bit lighter with when I add the paint, so I don't scoop into the paint that's already on the canvas. So if your paint is quite thick, you want to be really light-handed with the brush here. And then, like I had mentioned, I'm going to grab a little bit more of this turquoise here, nice and thick on the brush, and just create some really strong strokes here that are going to be very visible in the piece, even in the end. And as you can see here, there's already quite a bit of depth going on in this piece, quite a bit of layering, quite a bit of interest, and I'm really quite happy with the way that it's coming together here. So once you have all of your strokes down, you want to make sure that that dries 100%. And once it's 100% dry, you can go in and start to add your subject. So here I'm using a tracing paper image that I had drawn on here of the face that I'm using. And I'm just kind of deciding where I want it. And you can see the little bit of turquoise there is helping me decide and line up where I want it. And then I'm going to go ahead and use this white transfer paper. So this is the opposite, obviously, of a charcoal transfer paper. As my background is very dark, I want a white transfer paper so that I'll be able to see what I am tracing onto the background here. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to trace on a line drawing of my image here. I always check after the first couple marks just to make sure that it is transferring and that my paper is the correct orientation, because if you put it backwards, it's not going to transfer, and that can be really frustrating if you go through the whole thing. So always check at the beginning and then go through and transfer your drawing. Now, if you don't have tracing paper and transfer paper, that's okay. You can draw your image right onto the canvas here. I just find this way quite a bit easier and faster, and so I really like to use the tracing and transfer paper. And then once everything is drawn on here, then you can start to make decisions about where else to fill in the paint. So here I have my image drawn on. Just want to check to make sure I didn't miss any lines. And I believe there are just a couple lines on the side that I'm still going to transfer over. So I'm going to go ahead and go back and then just transfer the sides here. But always check before you take off the tracing paper, because again, it can be really hard to line up. And then once you're happy with it, you can remove the tracing and transfer paper. Okay, so next I'm going to go back to my paint here, and I'm going to go in with a detail brush and some straight black paint. And to start, I'm going to start knocking in the darkest shadows of this piece with black. And I'm going to grab a little bit of water here and loosen up the black. So I typically don't add water to my acrylic paint at all, except for if I'm doing some detail work with black paint. In that case, I like to add a little bit just to make the acrylic paint move a little bit more fluid onto the canvas. So I'm going to start here in the mouth region and start to add in the deepest shadows of the piece here. And it's a good way to start any acrylic painting by starting with the dark areas. And I'm not going to cover in everything fully. So part of my piece, I want it to be very expressive and kind of mysterious and a little elusive. So as you can see, when I start to paint this face on, I'm not going to be painting the full image. So I'm not going to be painting the full shadow areas, and I'm not going to be painting all the skin tone. I'm going to just be painting a selection. Now, what selection should you paint? Well, you should just paint whatever feels right to you. So you just want to start off and go for it. And then if you feel like you need to add a little bit more paint, you can go and add a little bit by bit to your canvas. Now I'm going to use a little bit of red and purple here mixed in with the black to kind of lighten it up as I go through and paint the mouth here. And you'll notice that I switched to this medium-sized brush here. You always want to use a brush that reflects the size of the section that you're filling in. So because I'm starting to fill in a little bit of a bigger section here, I switched to my brush. That'll just ensure that there's less brush strokes and the painting looks more kind of concise and less streaky. And then as I go across these lips, I'm now going to start to add in some lighter colors here and just kind of develop the area. Now with the lips, I do want them to look semi-realistic. So I'm following my reference photo here as to where there are shadows and highlights in different values, and I'm trying to reflect that here. But as I move through the piece, I'm going to break away quite a bit from the reference photo. So the reference photo isn't to help me recreate something that looks exact. It's more to give me the essence of a face that I can transfer onto this canvas and kind of make it my own. So you'll see that the finished piece doesn't look exactly the same as the reference photo, and that's, I think, exactly what you want, because you want to be making art that reflects you and your style and your personality, and not just, you know, replicating something that you see online. But as with that being said, it is nice to have a reference to follow. It's just very helpful to be looking at something when you're trying to emulate something else. Then I'm going to move on to the bottom lips here, and again trying to create a similar, more realistic lip shape, but with my own little funky colors here that I'm using. Okay, so next I'm going to go through and start to create more of the details with the black here. So I'm going to go in and add the nostrils and a couple different areas here. It's nice to work from dark to light when painting, not just when painting on a dark surface, but in general. So I like to paint the black to start and then work my way up to the highlights. So you start with the darkest tones, you knock those in, then you can go to medium tones, and at the very end add the highlights on top. And this kind of follows the layering process of paint when you're using acrylic paint. So the bottom layer would be darkest and the highlights would be on top. You're not going to put low lights on top of a highlight. It just is a bit counterintuitive when you're painting with acrylic paint specifically. So you're going to go in and add in all the dark areas to start. And so I'm just adding in some of the shadows and the hands here. I did under the neck area there, and just any areas that had the blackest blacks in the as you can see in the photo, the reference photo. And then next I'm going to go through and take this magenta color and add in some kind of midtones. So I'm going to take this on this nice little square brush here. It has nice strong strokes when I use this brush.
and I'm going to lay this color down just kind of in the mid-tone areas. So here there was like a mid-tone on the eyelid, so I'm going to add that in, and then again on the other side. And just in any areas that have a little bit of shadow but aren't quite as deep as the black. I'm going to also go through and add it on top of the black here on the neck and just kind of blend those two together a little bit. And this is going to help me to create some form. So I'll use it in all areas that are going to help me add in those dark areas. Now I'm also going to do a little bit on the forehead and to define the head shape area. This I added in a little bit of a darker purple here, as you can see. And again, I'm just following the shadow areas of my piece. So I've already done the deepest ones, and these are kind of like the secondary ones. And as you're painting, you're going to be making decisions on what makes sense for you to add and what you should omit. So you want to just use the enough paint to get your point across or convey your image across, but you also don't want to fill the whole piece. So for example, if I was to paint all the skin tone, it would really take away from the beautiful background that we painted there with all the different colors meshing together. And so by kind of only painting parts of this face, I tie in the background, so all the strokes in the background, with the face in the foreground, and together they seem like one piece. You want to make sure that all the paint is integrated so it's not separated and disjointed. And so sometimes when you paint a subject on top of a background and you don't kind of mix them or integrate them together, it can seem very disjointed. So that's kind of a pro to leaving the background in, is it kind of meshes everything together. And then again, I'm not really introducing any new colors that were not in the piece already. The only new color that I'm going to be introducing here is when I move on to the white paint marker. So now I'm just going to go through again with this smaller brush here, and I'm going to start to build up some form to the nose. So I'm just going to speed up the video here, but you'll be able to see I'm going to make sure that there's a range of darks and lights and midtones again, and I'm using different colors to do that. So instead of using light to dark, I'm going to be relying on my turquoise as my highlight color, and then that magenta color as my midtone, and just kind of working the piece this way. Now I do want the angle of the face to be very clear to the viewer, so I'm going to add in as much detail as necessary to make that clear to the viewer. So it is a bit of a tilted head here, and so I need to have a certain amount of detail for people to understand what they're seeing, but also I want to leave out as much detail as I can that's going to make it be a little bit more mysterious. So adding in features like the nose and the lips, it's very important because it really helps convey the face and the face angle to the viewer. So now I'm just switching back to my bigger brush here, and I'm going to add in the shoulder here as a highlighted area, and just kind of add in any extra colors that I want to knock in, especially in color blocking here. So this is kind of just a flat area I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do some work on the hands. Now, when I do the hands here, especially on this one side, I'm going to be adding in a bunch of color that I'm going to be adding in a bit more loosely and less detailed. So I'm going to just let it knock in there, and I want to kind of give the illusion of the hand without it being so literal. So in order to do that, I'm going to add in a couple of different colors together, but I'm going to leave it kind of just blocked together, and I'm not going to knock out details as much as I did on the face. So that's kind of going to give an interesting impression and let the mind of the viewer wander a little bit. I'm going to add in some of that mystery too. So I'm just going to go in a little bit more with the purple here just to create a little bit more dimension, but overall I'm going to leave it pretty elusive. Now I'm going to go in with this paint marker here and draw out the hand on the other side and do a couple details on the face. So I really love using these paint markers when you want to create thin lines with acrylic paint, because I do find it very difficult to create these types of thin lines with the paintbrush. And it is possible, it's just very time consuming. So might as well use an acrylic paint marker to do that instead. It'll be faster, it'll be more accurate, and your painting will still be all acrylic. My favorite paint markers are the Posca brand, so if you can get those in your area, highly recommend. And then also using this thin white line here is going to add quite a bit of variation to my lines in my piece and add a lot of interest. So you want to make sure that you're varying strokes, you're varying line widths, you're varying marking techniques, because that's all what's going to make your piece look very interesting. Next, I'm going to go back to my thicker brush here, and I'm going to create some hair. So in the reference photo, you can't really see the hair, but I do like the idea of having a little bit of black kind of take over here and differentiate between the hair, the back of the head, and the background of the piece. But I'm going to keep it fairly loose, and as you see here, I'm just doing little twists in my wrist, and I'm not filling in all the area. Just going to do a bit of dry brush there. And next I'm going to go back, and now I'm going to add in some details to the piece. So we're getting near the end here, and I'm just going to add in some fingernails and some last minute details, as well as a little bit of highlights to the hair area just to add some interest here so it's not all totally flat. So now is where you add in all your last details that you want to bring the piece really to life. I'm also going to fill in the collarbone area here with that magenta mid-tone color and just finish up all the details that I need to finish to kind of get this piece to where I want it to be and be done. I'm also adding in some highlights to the nose here that are just really small and slight, like on the inside of the nostril here on both sides with my paint marker. And then I'm going to go through with a little bit of this purple color and add the clef in the chin and just all these last minute tiny details here. I'm also going to add in some extra highlights, so bring up any areas that aren't quite as bright that I would like them to be. And then once I've done adding all my details, make sure that you always sign and date your painting so you can look back and see how far you've come. And that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this video and that you learned quite a bit about Expressionism, and I can't wait to see what you guys create. This is a really good technique to paint intuitively and really express yourself using acrylic paint, and it's really great for layering. So I hope you enjoy.
Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the demonstration and learned a lot about Expressionism, and I can't wait to see what you create. Feel free to tag me on Instagram with your finished works, and otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.